All right, now we will go. One day we shall go into greater detail on every aspect. Meaning, when we go into greater detail, we're discussing how we can broaden the effect of our connections, and by virtue of a stronger connection, a broader connection, we have greater control over the cosmos. Now, in the Torah, again, we come to the third aspect, where it says, "V'nasu." We have, the Zohar discusses that as the third flag, and the third flag is the flag of Bnei Dan. You can notice that in verse 25. V'nasa degel machne Bnei Dan. Okay? And in Bnei Dan you had the 2 months, Asher and Naphtali. Asher and Naphtali. The Zohar explains what is Degel Ashlishi. This is Pnei Shor. Of the 4 holy beasts, the energy that is connected with Dan, and Dan incidentally is in the north, which is left. And from the 4 angels, the angel which will be connected with the north, or with these 3 tribes, or with these 3 influences, is Gabriel, who is also from the left. And where does the encampment belong? V'noseh b'tzat safon ala mishkan, which is also left. All right. Now here we see a complete departure from the other 2 or 6 signs. The other 2, we were trying to make a balance between central and right to permit the energies that provide energy to be balanced with right and central. Here suddenly, from every aspect, Taurus rules with his negativity. Taurus rules with his negativity. And then we might even raise the question, it's almost unfair. Why didn't the Creator permit a little more of a balance into this aspect of Shor? But in any event, when we're discussing night, we're discussing absolute night, and we are generally discussing night meaning after 12 o'clock, which is already, again, another clue for these 3 months. Because the West has partially evening, night, but it always contains somewhat of daytime, just physically, from a physical point of view. In the north, unless I guess if you're in the northern part of Norway or the northern part of Alaska or the northern part of Canada, you can have a little light coming from both sides. But that's not where people generally are located. In fact, the reason people are not located because they couldn't handle it. You might think that it is so completely negative, because look what's happened. You've got Taurus, you've got the Shor from the Chayot HaKodesh, from the holy beasts. It's which angel? Angel Gabriel. Also the left column of the angels, making manifest. And it's in the north. Now how bad can that become, right? But if you recall, in the last session we had, Taurus has all of this surrounding influence of light, really, because it's called Chodesh Ziv. It's called the month of light. No other month is called the month of light except Taurus, as we explained when we discussed Taurus. So there's something there in the shore, in the Taurus, that cannot be all negative, despite the fact that it is negative. And yet, for whatever reason, it does not need the support. I mean, like, try to balance it out a little, right? And if the Zohar says that why, again, as we discussed last time, when was the Mishkan established? When was it established? And if we look at verse 11 in chapter 10, it says, "And it came to pass in the second year, in the second month." Why the second month? And we had already gone through this in the previous section where this same idea is mentioned. Because where there is the most intense negativity is when the tzaddik or the Kabbalist would rise to study. When does he rise to study? After 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock at night, you could say in almost all parts of the world, you don't have any more sunlight. In almost all parts of the world, except in the summertime, really up north. But for most of humankind, 12 o'clock represents complete darkness. And we have learned, too, that because there is complete darkness means there is the epitome of negativity. And where there is the opportunity for complete negativity, as we said, like the state of Israel was established in the month of Taurus, it wasn't by chance, it was only to provide the Jew who has a job to do with that opportunity of drawing down more energy, if he knows how to take advantage of it. So the reason why the tzaddik and the Kabbalist would rise at 12 o'clock or after 12 o'clock is because where you have the highest intensity of negative energy, meaning what? Drawing the most intense negative energy, that's exactly where you can reap the greatest benefit. And therefore, when they rose in the middle of the night, when did they rise? Not before 12 o'clock, but at 12 o'clock. Because in almost every part of the universe, 12 o'clock would represent the highest point of negative energy, and where you have the greatest amount of drawing power, that's where you have the greatest opportunity to balance out. That's what the tzaddik wanted. Therefore, when we ask why is there such a concentration of negative energy, it is because most people are sleeping at that hour. Most people are sleeping at that hour. And for those who are not worthy, or those who feel kind of tired to get up in the middle of the night, and most people do really feel tired, while you would say, why does everyone feel tired at night and not during the day? Is it because he worked hard during the day and that's why he feels tired at night? That is not the answer. Now, of course, there are people with insomnia, right? But insomnia is not the preferred idea of not being able to sleep. But let's forget about the people with insomnia. Most people want to sleep at night. Now, why do most people want to sleep at night? Because it says that that time is reserved for the tzaddikim. Why is it reserved for the tzaddikim? Because there is such an intensity of negative energy, the possibility and the opportunity is therefore the greatest at any time during the day by which energy can be drawn down. And they do it with whatever the prayers and whatever the kavanot are required. And therefore, don't be surprised that suddenly we find here, where there is total darkness, there's a complete concentration of only darkness, both from the point of view that Dan is in the north, and the angel is Gabriel, and the holy beast represented by the shore, by the Taurus. All right. So this would be the concentrations of the evening. There is more to it, but getting back to the question of why, which seems to contradict what we had been saying, is why should weddings be performed under the stars, meaning nightfall? Now I think you have your answer, right? Does that mean you should begin a business, let's say at 12 o'clock, after 12 o'clock midnight? I might almost recommend it, if you know how to do it. But in any event, why did the Kabbalists recommend marriages under the stars? Now you understand, because then there is so much complete negative energy, meaning the opportunity. Now, if you want to know why, unfortunately, so many marriages wind up in divorces, is because that is a problem. Maybe for those who aren't too sure of whether they're doing the right thing or not, maybe you should get married in the morning or in the afternoon, but not at night, right? Because when you get married at night, know that the opportunity of drawing down the most negative energy of the day is present during nighttime. Now, if you don't know how to handle that energy, and that's what the brachot are all about, the Sheva brachot and so on, to take advantage of this kind of negative energy that becomes manifest only at night.
So what do we want? Negative energy?
When you have the greatest amount of negative energy, you then have the greatest potential. The greatest potential for drawing down, if you do it right, if you make a circuit of energy. Where would you have the greatest amount of energy? If it's a 5-watt bulb or a 2 billion watt bulb? Obviously, where there is a greater negative pole.
He thinks in the term of negative is bad. Notice the drawing.
No. Negative is is the greatest opportunity. That's why I said opportunity. However, it can wind up to be the greatest disaster. If that same negative energy is short-circuited, then you know if you have a 2 billion watt circuit in a building and there's a short, that would create a complete fire in a building where a 5-watt bulb burned. Nothing really would happen.
What about the morning time? It's positive energy. Now, maybe it's not drawing as much energy, but it's positive.
But that's why they suggested if someone married during the daytime, there's nothing wrong with it.
No, day could be afternoon, which is
that's well.
Morning would be positive.
That's right. However, the fact that you can get married in the morning, but you're settling for less. That's why I said there's a possibility that maybe business deals or other things should be consummated at night. But there you're running the risk. In the morning you run no risk, right? Because it's heavily laden with positive energy. So you don't run the risk. Whereas at night there's a problem. There could be a problem.
When is the best time to get married?
At night.
At night when? After midnight?
After midnight would be the most preferable, but at night. At night.
When it's dark.
When it's dark. That's right.
May I ask you something? I understand here, but what do you mean by positive energy, by negative energy, and by opportunity? Opportunity to what?
Opportunity to make a circuit of energy in the most highest intensified field. If you had a 2 billion watt bulb, and if you didn't have a filament, what would happen? It would blow. Is that correct? But if you can manage to create a circuit, you would have more.
It doesn't explain to me anything. It's too abstract. What do you mean by positive energy or negative energy?
Positive energy means the sharing concept. That's positive energy.
The sharing concept.
The sharing concept is called positive energy. Negative energy means drawing to oneself. When you draw energy to oneself, that is not a circuit of energy. That's why I brought out the point of where does ultimately the light in the bulb come by which pole? Forgetting about why it is so, but how does electricity become manifested in the bulb? By which pole?
Anyway,
By the positive pole.
not answer, to bring it more close to our daily life, to our purpose in life.
Okay. That's what
As a human being.
That's correct. Meaning one must be sharing. Meaning one must have negativity, and the greatest negativity must involve what?
Do people understand what you mean by sharing?
I say most of the people here do understand what I mean. But if you don't understand, what is it that you don't understand?
The meaning of positive.
Sharing? Is that such a difficult concept? Maybe. What's that?
He didn't understand the positive meaning and the negative meaning.
Positive means sharing, negative means receiving. I mean, it's as simple as all that. I don't know what's so difficult, really.
No, I guess, Rav, you didn't read any of the books.
No. Forgetting about that. But I mean, who doesn't understand sharing means positive? That's called positivity. And negativity means throwing to itself, whether it's in physics, whether it's chemistry, whether it's any subject. That's the terms that are used. Generosity is another form of sharing. That's right.
He'll understand it better in this
Rav Berg,
terms.
Okay.
for after midnight, you have the most negative, which is the most
Drawing.
Most drawing, and therefore you have the greatest opportunity.
restrict that.
That's right. And if you restrict,
If you do the right way, then you don't burn.
that is correct.
No, I understand.
That is correct. No,
Let's go.
yeah, you have a problem with it.
So then we come from this.
If you can move the microphone so everyone can hear.
Sharing. What do you mean by sharing?
Generosity, is that a term that would help you? Be generous. Okay.
Sharing. So the main
Giving,
point-
tzedakah, charity.
Okay. So by positive energy, we mean sharing.
Why do we call it a positive energy? Why do we call it a positive energy? For two reasons. Number one, why are you sharing? What does sharing mean? It extends out.
Yeah.
It extends out. It embraces more around you. It embraces almost the universe, right? You can share it to someone. But when you receive for yourself, meaning negative means draws to me, then I'm closing everything out. I close the whole world out.
Yes.
It only includes me.
That's right. So, you see, it develops ego center.
Exactly.
If that helps you, right. But I didn't want to go into all of the, because we know what, most people know what that means, but if that helps you, that's good. Okay? It means this is the center. And if this is the center, then everything else is left out. So naturally you become, what is the payment or the liability of egocentricity? I see only me. I don't see anything else around me. That's why it's referred to as being negative. Who wants to see just what's over here? Someone could want to rob me. And if I'm only seeing me, I can't see who wants to rob me. And a million other circumstances that I can cause because all I see is that which is centered within me. All right?
On my activities, on my emotions, on
Anything
comes from the center.
That's right.
Which is the
We have another word for negative. Desire to receive for oneself alone.
yes, that's it.
All right.
Which is negativity in the essence.
Right.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct. That's
To
correct.
me, is the negativity in the essence.
All right. And now we'll go to the fourth, the Degel Haravi'i, which is the fourth Degel, meaning the fourth flag, but again, the fourth aspect, which is Machne Ephraim. Machne Ephraim, and there it is referred to in verse 22 in chapter 10 of Numbers, Beha'alotcha, and there we had Menashe and Binyamin Okay, Menashe and Binyamin. I'm mentioning those two other tribes, so you will know which months they were.
Who goes with Dan? You mentioned.
Oh, I didn't mention. Dan is Naphtali and Asher. Okay, Naphtali and Asher. All right. Now, what does the Zohar reveal for us about this concept of the West, which is where the Torah says the encampment of Dan took place? That's in Ma'arav. Now, what does Ma'arav mean? What does West mean, other than a direction, other than where the sun sets? It is referred to and draws the energy of Pnei Adam, of the four beasts, the holy beasts. Adam, and why is it called Adam, meaning person? Because intrinsically, the characteristic that humankind is born with is, as we said, with the two, when the baby comes out of the mother's womb, what does the doctor do? If the baby comes out like that, the first thing the doctor will do is open up the palm and see if it reverts back to this position. And if the baby usually comes out this way, and what the physician does is separate the arms, and if it innately returns back to this position, it is normal, indicating that this is what the Torah said about humankind. Intrinsically, we are of a self-centered energy intelligence, meaning to draw everything to ourselves. Now, what is the difference? What is the difference between Adam? What is the difference between Adam and Dan, right? What is the difference between Malchut? Ephraim is Malchut. West is Malchut. Malchut is not an energy intelligence. It is the recipient of whatever is around us. That's why whatever we see, we like. But that is because everything around us wants to come into us. It is the vessel, so to speak. It is not an energy intelligence. There are only three energy intelligences, like in the atom. How many energy intelligences are there in the atom? Three. And the Sefer Yetzirah says there is only three energy intelligences. What does it mean, energy intelligence? Not the effect of which, but rather that causes. There is a cause of energy referred to as positive energy. In other words, if I want to share, what makes me share? What makes me share? The influx or the infusion of positive energy, right column. Love to you. What causes me to want to receive? What causes me to want to receive? That I want. Negative energy. Left column. Restriction. Central column. The filament. What permits me to have a thought that if Kabbalah teaches me that the primary purpose of the existence of the Jew is to restrict, what is that energy? What is it called? It's called central column, or restriction. Now, what is Adam? What is man? Man can make use of all of these energies. He, by and within himself, is only the recipient of these three energies. In other words, if he makes use of these three, that's what he'll get. If he makes use of one, that's what he gets. He is the recipient. Negative energy is the vehicle by which we make our movements. The effect is not a cause. Adam means effect. Adam means effect. In other words, if I share, I'll get something. I'll be the effect of that action. If I restrict, whatever restriction means, I will be the effect of that action. If I am completely in tune only into the desire to receive for oneself alone, I will receive the result of that kind of energy intelligence. So there are only three, but man is the recipient of that. Man is the recipient. All right?
Excuse me, and how is this negative energy manifest itself in a human being as a state, as an emotion?
He is the recipient of all influences in the world. Let's say if he did nothing. Right? Did nothing.
When I want to receive something, I feel I'm state of being envious.
No, why don't you just say a person has to make a living to support his rent. Okay? Let's take a simple example.
I'm afraid not to have a shelter.
No, that's right.
For me to do something about it.
I'll explain. I have a desire for shelter. Now, what makes me go out and work? Because I have a desire for shelter. The result is shelter. Shelter is not an energy intelligence. It is the result of an action.
Before the result is...
there is one of the three. That's correct. That is correct.
Refuse to be left without a shelter.
Right. Right. Okay? Therefore, man is the recipient. Adam is the recipient of whatever action is taking place, whatever energy intelligence is performing in whichever which way, the result of which is referred to as Adam. Alright? Umidalat HaMelachim, it's Raphael. It is Raphael, and it is in Ma'arav. Shekol Elu Heim Bechinat HaMalchut. What is the term for Ma'arav? Malchut. There are four basic Sfirot. There is Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, and Malchut. Ma'arav, the western side of the universe, meaning what? The western influence refers to Malchut. It is the recipient of everything. V'imo Refuah. And there we have the angel of Raphael. Now we'll get, why is the West associated with Refuah, or the angel Raphael? Again, there are four angels. We have Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, and Raphael. Raphael, the one connected with Refuah, deals with those three influences referred to as Ephraim, Menashe, and Binyamin. Alright? Ki besad Adam, nichlal din ha'elyon bo. For a moment, if you recall, the last lecture, we said which is the month of Refuah. Do you recall? What? Iyar. Right?
Which one is here?
Iyar is Taurus. That is...
May.
What's that?
It's May.
Yes. Or the end of April. That's right. Or Chodesh Iyar. Or Chodesh Iyar. Because so far as Adam is concerned, he's Nichlal Din Elyon Bo. It is negative. What do you mean it's negative? Effect is also negative. Effect is also a form of negativity. Is that correct? What is effect? Receiving. It is not an energy intelligence. This is very subtle. What is the difference between Gvura and Malchut? What is the difference? Gvura is a pure energy intelligence of desire. That doesn't make Gvura bad, does it? Because we must have a left column pole in an atom. We must have a left column pole in a bulb. You must have that because that is part of any circuitry. To desire the result of this circuitry is called Malchut. The desire for the result of energy. In other words, there is no desire for... Some people would rather just be a sharing kind of people. They never want to receive anything in return. That means they could be involved merely in sharing, the result of which will be satisfaction. Satisfaction. Not like negativity, I've got to perform a certain action, that action will then provide something which will permit that which I seek to become a reality. ומתרפא זה אוחז בכנף של השור כשרוצה להביא אותם לתחום הגדול. What is the root? What is the root? This is really, I guess, more for those who take the Talmud Sefirot will understand this a little clear, but I'll try to bring it down. Where is the root of Malchut? Malchut, we said, means the recipiency. Recipiency, whether it's an active recipiency or it's the result of recipiency. In other words, having a home is the result. The home itself was not the negative energy. Is that correct? It is the result of negative energy. In other words, I need a home. Therefore, the fact that I need a home creates activity within me. Either I have to go work somewhere, or I have to do something by which I shall be the recipient of a remuneration. That remuneration will provide what? The objective. But it is not the energy itself. The energy, the thing that stirs me, the thing that makes me want to achieve that which I want. That which I want is the result. But when we speak of energy intelligence, it means that which moves me. That's right. The desire that I want, the recipiency of that desire is the house. But obviously one is bound up with the other. So Malchut, in a certain sense, is also bound up with what? With negativity. All right? Now, it does not mean that every negative activity will always result in that which is desired. Is that correct? Is there a guarantee that because I want, and I'm going to work, and I'll open up a business, and it'll provide all those things that I want? Is that true? No, not necessarily. So in other words, by making use of the negative energy of intelligence, of desire, may not necessarily result in my achieving Adam, the effect of what I'm seeking. Therefore, the Malach of Raphael, since can connect here. Where is the place where the Raphael comes in? In other words, when you want something, you want the objective. Do you want the activity? Yes, there are some people who may not need the business, right? But they have nothing else to do. Merely for a pastime, they go in and they're active and they're busy. But that is only because the lack of what to do with their time. So many people are connected. We are not discussing how to kill time. We are discussing those who want to make use of their time to achieve an objective. All right? So his entering into whatever position to arrive at the effect of a house requires activity. But not always is that activity going to result in the objective. And therefore, the Creator has put the energy intelligence of Raphael into this concept, which is connected with Shor, which is connected with Taurus. What is Taurus? The negative energy. That's how it begins. And along with Taurus, we have already learned that Taurus is the month of Refuah. What does Refuah mean? Straightening out things. What does Refuah mean? A cure. What does it mean? Putting back where things were before something happened. What is a cure? What is a cure? A person who's healthy, does he need a cure? No. It's when things get off balance that in comes the cure, and what does it do? It restores. It doesn't create something new. It restores the body, so to speak, into a position of balance. That's all. So the reason that we want to connect in any aspect of an objective the Creator has inserted the aspect of Raphael, the angel of Raphael, which is Ma'arav. Now, why is that Ma'arav? Because the sun is actually the energy. Without the sun, we can't exist. Right? Where does the sun set? Where is its direction headed for? And where does it wind up? Does it end? In other words, where does all my activity of my day's labor wind up? In my day's labor? That's only for someone who has nothing to do with his time. So let him kill time working. But for most people, that is not the objective. The objective is that he's going to have a home at the end. In other words, this energy must wind up somewhere. Somewhere. Where the sun winds up, somewhere. It winds up in the west. It winds up in this basket. It winds up in the place where that's what you want ultimately. So Ma'arav refers to recipiency, and because it originates. In other words, Refuah couldn't just come in. You couldn't ask for the angel of Raphael to assist you if there was no connection. But Malchut does come and does originate from what? From negative activity. It must. Without negative activity, there would be no effect. There would be no effect. No sharing. Sharing does not necessarily have to mean that you have pleasure out of sharing. The power of negativity provides, generally speaking, if you've got the right desire. Not every desire, again, is even right. One thinks he has a desire, he wants to achieve this, that, and the other thing. He wants to Raphael, to balance, stabilize things, that even though in my own mind I could be completely wrong in what I think I will receive, but because I'm putting in effort, hopefully the effort that I have injected, infused, will produce the desired result that I really need. So that's where Raphael was.
When you go into something, you go with certainty. If you go already from the start with uncertainty, then you don't go into it. So you go already. So
you've got to go in, as they say, be positive.
Right,
that's right.
Absolutely. So,
Al smach ma. On what? On what? On knowledge. And that means on that knowledge it should be guaranteed. Since we have this knowledge, but the knowledge is 5%. How much knowledge do we have? 5%, generally speaking.
Right.
You think that's enough to depend on 5% of knowledge to know that it's going to be successful?
So therefore you don't go. We say that.
So don't do anything. So don't do anything.
No.
The answer is not like that. We're studying here.
Yes. Something that now
how I can make use of even where the 5% of that which is above thee and beyond the 5%, which I don't have my hands on, that I don't even know what condition might arise tomorrow, but I wanted to stabilize it as I go along.
So now we're going to, even with uncertainty, we should go after them.
That's right. At least the 5% should be there. There should be some desire, but nobody has guarantees. He's trying to provide us with tools that will be. Well,
in our classes that we learned a month ago about uncertainty, I like you.
Yeah,
now you are completely.
That's right. That's right. Okay, that's right. All right. Okay, and that will take care of these four aspects and the 12 tribes. Now, there are several other aspects that I wanted to discuss on this particular weekly portion, and that is immediately following the encampments. We then have another section which deals as follows. And Moshe said to his father-in-law, Chotem Moshe, because he had, beside being Yitro, he had another name, Chovav. He pleads with him. He says, we are journeying. We are now journeying. Now you know what that word nosim means, if you can remember it, because if you don't remember or you don't know the interpretation of the Zohar, it's going to sound pretty ridiculous. Because here he says, since we are journeying into a place of which the Lord says, I will give it to you, meaning Israel. Come thou with us, and we will do thee good, for the Lord has spoken good concerning Israel. Therefore come with us. If you come with us, it'll be good for you. And in verse 30 of chapter 10, what is Yitro or Chovav's response? Vayomer elav lo elech. I will not go. Ki im el arsi ve'el moladati elech. I will depart to my own land. For what reasons? There are several reasons that are given. Because he was going back, he was going to try to correct. He came from Midian. He was going to try to make Gerim. There's one commentary. He was going to try to spiritually elevate these people who were into idol worshiping and so forth and so on. All right. So he says, while it might be very good for me to go along with you, nevertheless, I feel I have a more important job. So he says, I'm not going, I'm returning. And Moshe continues, and he says, leave us not, I pray thee, for as much as thou knowest how we are to encamp in the wilderness, and thou shalt be to us instead of eyes. You shall be the eyes for us. Look who's talking. To whom? Moshe, whom you would assume there wasn't practically anything that he did not have control over in the cosmos, was now pleading with Yitro to come with him, and he answers him, I don't want to come. And then he's pleading again, please come. And not only now come with us, is he changing his tactic? Before he tells him, come with us, you know why you should come with us? It's going to be very good for you. That is in verse 29. Then he says, no, I have a job to do. Then what does he tell him? You have a job to do. Obviously, he's telling him now, do not leave us because you shall be our eyes. And he continues, V'haya ki telech imanu, and if you will go with us, V'haya hatovahu, and, in other words, there's a little doubt now, a little doubt, and if you will go with us, then V'haya hatovahu, then we can expect that goodness. In other words, if Yitro does not go, it seems that Moshe now has his doubts of whether they will achieve this goodness that already the Creator said was theirs. What's that? Yitro and Chovav is the same person. He had 7 names. He had 7 names. It's the same individual. Right? And here, he doesn't respond. Do you remember when he asked him the first time? He said, I want to go back to my country. Then he says here, Moshe again pleads with him. He says, not only will it be good for you, but it'll be good for us. And in fact, maybe if you don't come with us, it may not even be good.
So was he doubting God's...
And that is the question. God already told him. He didn't tell him only with Yitro or only with Chovav will it be good. No. That was Moshe's first request. Come with us because it's going to be good for you. As God promised, it will be good for us. I want you to know, until today, I really couldn't figure out the answer. The question is raised, but what kind of a discourse is this? And furthermore, he's answering him, I will not go, but I must return to my place of birth. Where is Moshe? Where is Moshe? Isn't he? Is he a prophet? As we shall shortly discover, he was the prophet that The Lord said there is, and there never will be a greater prophet as Moshe. And did Moshe see everything, or didn't he see everything? He did see everything. We must be. Then if he saw everything, that's right. He saw from beginning to end. That's right. How come he's even now questioning of whether he?
Maybe it was a speech of sales to sell to each other. We need you to come, to try to convince him in a way. So if you come, you're going to be good. Is it possible?
What's that?
Yeah, but how come now we're taking the Bible as it's written?
Well, I'm raising questions. So obviously there must be more to what the story is indicating. There has to be, right? But what no, that's good. But what we understand now is there must be something deeper than what meets the eye. All right. The Zohar elsewhere explains that Yitro was one of the three that stemmed from Cain. We know that Moshe was an incarnation of Abel, from the good of Hevel, and that Moshe, in his connection with, in fact, before that, in the same. Now, to make the passage even a little more difficult for you. Now, you will recall what he asked of Yitro. Now, in this very same portion, which seems to be unconnected because things happen in between where they begin again with the old saying, give us meat, give us fish, and, they're back to their old habits again, the Jews.
Nothing new.
Yeah, nothing new, right? The Jew never changes. And it says in chapter 12, and Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. For he had married a Cushite woman. Cushi, right? Well, one comment is a woman of the Ethiopian origin. Okay, Moshe. However, the Zohar and also one commentary in Rashi says, just to ease the blow a little. I mean, that Kushit means beautiful.
That's what they said. Like it's beautiful.
All right. No laughter. All right. It's a code. It's a code.
That's what the Zohar says.
Okay.
And why she called Zipporah?
What's that?
Why she called Zipporah?
That was her name, but she was very beautiful. She was very beautiful, and therefore they were discussing Ki Isha Kushit Lakach. And then what happens? And then in between, it says the next verse, and they said, had the Lord indeed spoken only with Moses? Had he not spoken also with us? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was Ish Moshe Anav Ma'od Mikol Ha'adam Asher Al Pnei Adama. His name is Moshe. Okay? The Ish Moshe Anav Ma'od. Anab means very humble. And there was no greater humility by any living individual as was with Moses. Now, what is the connection between the fact that they began to talk about Lashon Hara, about Moshe, that he married a Cushit, and what did they want? So he married a Cushit. Right? So what? If that's what Moshe wanted, that's what he did. And didn't they know that Moshe was pretty much connected? So the verse wants to tell you that don't think he wasn't so connected. In fact, he was. And as the verse continues on, in 7, it says, my servant Moses, this is the Lord talking. My servant Moses, and verse 6, he says, hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, do make myself known unto him in a vision, only through a vision. I do speak with him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so. He is trusted in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, and not in dark speeches, and not in dreams and so on. What does all this? Is the Lord trying to impress Miriam and Aaron about the greatness of their brother? What is all this about?
It's reinforcing.
What's that?
It's reinforcing what he is. The greatness of Moses.
Right. We all should also not forget that this happens to be their brother. They're not speaking about a stranger. It was Moshe and it was Miriam and Aaron. And furthermore, what happens, as usual, in verse 10, it says, verse 10, and when the cloud was removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. Listen to the verse. If anyone can't be convinced about the cosmic code of the Bible, but thinks to take everything literally, look what it tells us. First of all, it tells us, forgetting that, and not by surprise, if you read the Zohar in this week's portion, it is the place where the Zohar says very clearly that if anyone believes that the narrations and stories of the Torah are nothing more but narrations, he is a fool. Because there are complete secrets. This is where he states that the Torah is only a cosmic code. It is only a total code of which we must make use of the Kabbalah. Where? In this week's portion also. He couldn't pick out another portion to say that. There are other stories. Why does the Zohar feel the importance of stressing that aspect that this is completely unrevealed? In other words, a literal translation of the Torah means absolutely nothing for one who just simply translates it. Now, what does it say here? Who got the punishment? Who received the brunt of the wrath of the Lord of Lashon Hara? Miriam. What about Aaron? It says Vatadaber Miriam ve'Aaron b'Moshe, that they both spoke. Why pick out on the woman again? Like what did Adam say when he ate from the apple? Who's to blame? Always the woman, right? Always the woman. They're always, maybe they are really always at fault, right? Could be. And here we see. Now look what it says in verse 11. Look what it says. Verse 10. And when the cloud was removed, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. That means everybody saw it. And then the Torah has to tell us, and Aaron looked at her, like everybody else saw it, right? Not Aaron. And then like he suddenly turned around and he noticed it, like he didn't notice it before. And Aaron said unto Moses, I pray thee sin upon us, for that we have done foolishly. Okay? And here he pleads for her, and we have this famous verse of Refuah. The famous verse of Refuah, which incidentally is a tool for those who are ill, seriously ill. in chapter 12, verse 13, and Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, but I don't want to even read the English because the English will not give you the power of the healing process, where it says, El na refa na la. Okay?
Why was it only Miriam that was?
What's that? Well, we have more than one question, right? We have several questions. I mean, how could they even speak about Moses? I mean, first of all, why did it bother them? And furthermore, why did they wait until now? I mean, he had married her a long time ago. Why didn't they speak then? Why didn't they speak when he married her? Now, 15 years later or 20 years later, now is the time to bring up this matter. For what reason? In fact, there was nothing that should have even prompted it, except for the incident of, where the Jews were mitlonen, they complained again, about the food and everything and so on.
What spoke exactly? What they say?
They said, Al odot aisha hakushit, asher lakah. But even that, a better question, they spoke about the woman, the Kushit that Moshe married. In other words, obviously,
Not about Moshe.
what?
Not even about Moshe.
They spoke, no, it says, asher lakach, that he took. In other words, he should not have possibly married this Kushit.
I was puzzled by the question, how could he close the eyes?
Right. I'm bringing in this section, which is in the same parasha. Obviously, there must be some connection because this is about Yitro, and here, this is the man who is going to lead the nation of Israel. Everybody, I'm waiting too. I'm waiting for them to tell me what the answer is. But we'll try it out. I'm going to disappoint you all. Going to leave you for the first time with questions, because since we only have just a few moments to answer it. But I'll try to lead you in a direction, and maybe one lecture you walk home trying to do your own thinking rather than have everything presented on a silver platter. Right? What? Where is the restriction of the desire to receive? Right? That's what Jonas meant. Beautiful. Boy, I'm beautiful. Is that what you meant? Oh, you didn't? I'm sorry. You see how I did. I put the right words in your mouth. I didn't mean that. All right. In this, again, I'll load you up with some more questions. But actually, they're all related. It's all within this one parsha, heavily laden. In this parsha, it discusses on chapter 11 that for David it's murder. For a Gemini like him, it's murder. I mean, did I leave him hanging like that? But he says he likes restriction. Isn't Gemini restriction of restriction? It's the air of air, right?
Libra is not restriction, right?
What?
Libra does
No.
It's
air. It's a restriction sign, but it's a right column sign. Yeah, nice sign. They can drive you nuts, but it's a nice sign. All right. Now, in chapter 11, verse 26, all of a sudden, it says, and there remained two men in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, and the name of the other was Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them. Were of them that were recorded, but had not gone out unto the tent, and they prophesied in the camp. They prophesied. They were prophets. The Torah says they were prophets. And suddenly, and they began to prophesy, and there was nothing wrong with prophesying. And there ran a young man, and the young man, they say, was Yoshua, and told Moses and said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Oh, I'm sorry. It was not. No. It was, the son, that's right. It was, Elazar, I think. Elazar. Right. The son of Moshe, I think it was. What? Or was it Gershom? Was it Gershom? Okay. I don't remember. I don't remember offhand. But in any event, and he comes to say that they're prophesying. And Joshua answers, my Lord, shut them in. Meaning more than that. Adoni Moshe, Klaim, get rid of them. What was wrong? What did they say that was so terrible? Also, within this same portion of the week, what is this connection between all that has preceded and all that has transpired? Now, in this portion, we were talking about drawing energies. This seemed to be, we spent most of the time, in fact, when you take out the Torah, also in this portion of the Torah, in Beha'alotcha, in chapter 10, you have Vayhi ben Soah Ha'aron, Vayomer Moshe, the prayer that is recited when we take out the Torah, and also Uvnuchi Yoma Shuva Hashem Revavot Alfei Yisrael, also the return of the Torah. What does it mean, ben Soah Ha'aron? You know that the code meaning for that word naso means drawing energy. That's it in a nutshell. And this whole parasha is wound up and bound up with only one idea: drawing energy. I'll give you we'll go into the first question, and the rest we may cover in 2 weeks, hence in Yitzhak Hashem, or you'll figure it out yourself. What's that? Moshe, we once said this before. We know that, in fact, in this week's portion, also it's referred to about Sisra. We know that Rabbi Akiva came from Bnei Gerim. Bnei Gerim. And we once asked the question, and we know that Rabbi Akiva was a soul on a far higher level than Moshe. And we asked, why did Rabbi Akiva have to come down that way? Right? Why couldn't he come straight down, his soul being incarnated from Jewish great-great-great-great-grandparents? Why did it have to go that way? And the answer is, and because of that he didn't write the Zohar, but why was he